So
Well,
we're on record. Mrs. Spies, take it away.
okay. Well, I heard from some kids that you studied immigration in third grade. Can you show me with a thumbs up if you did a little studying of immigration in third grade? Yeah. Okay, awesome. Well, you know, we study Wisconsin history in fourth grade. And one of the big parts of Wisconsin history is all the different people that came from so many different places, starting with different Native American groups who've been here for thousands of years, up until still today. More people coming and more people coming. And a lot of us can trace some of our ancestors back to different countries. Do any of you know of any of your ancestors that maybe came from another place to live here in Wisconsin? Ella, what do you know about your ancestors?
I know some of mine on my dad's side came from Switzerland, and I know some on my mom's side came from France.
Right. How many of you, give me a thumbs up, know maybe where some of your ancestors are from? Who's got a thumb? Miss Gallagher, Cam, Brenna. Okay, Uriah. That's who I'm seeing right now. Mrs. Hartman, Mrs. Dudley. Well, you know what I was always told? I was always told by my parents that my ancestors were from Germany. And we did a little tracing back of our family tree. And some of my ancestors came here in 1865. And that's a kind of an important date in American history. I don't know if any of you know this, but that is the kind of the ending of the Civil War. Yeah, so I found out that a lot of my ancestors ended up coming to Wisconsin right around the end of the Civil War, and a lot of them came from Germany. Have any of you ever heard of one of those tests you can take that kind of takes your DNA and helps you figure out where some of your ancestors came from? Has anyone ever taken one of those tests? No? Okay, well, you know what? I just got to take one this year. And a friend of mine, she had one of the tests and she didn't really want to use it. So she just gave it to me. And I know they can be kind of expensive. So I wanted to show you a little bit of what I found out. You know what I had to do? This is kind of gross. But to get my DNA sent it to the company, I had to spit into a little tube. Yeah. And I had to send that in, my spit in, and then they scientifically analyzed that. And they were able to see where some of my ancestors may have lived in the past. So I just pulled up a couple charts and I'll show them to you. I got to share my screen. I have so many things open now. Just hold on.
I probably have to give you permission, Mrs. Spies, just a second.
Okay. Miss, any of the other teachers want to share any of your stories real quick about some of your ancestors or?
Well, one of the things that I found out, I also have ancestors from Germany. And they came over in the later 1800s, a little bit later than yours, Mrs. Spies. And one thing that changed along the way, and it changed on the ships, was the spelling of my maiden name. It's pronounced exactly the same in German, but it's spelled different. My maiden name was Ronk, R-O-N-K. But in German, it was R-A-N-K. So they would have had to spell it rank, or we would have pronounced it rank here instead of rank. But that was changed on the ships. I was always told that it was changed at Ellis Island. It did not change at Ellis Island. It changed before that when they got onto the ships. So that was interesting for me to learn. And when I was at Ellis Island this summer, my brother had gone a little bit later than I did, and he actually located some of our family names that came through Ellis Island. So that was kind of cool.
Sometimes if you don't know where your ancestors came from, sometimes your last name can be a clue. My maiden name before I got married was Schmidt. And that actually, I looked that up, and that can mean a blacksmith. So maybe one of my ancestors was maybe a blacksmith back in Germany or something. So there's some things you can just learn about sometimes your last names too. Okay, I'm going to share my screen and hopefully this works. And you can see some of my reports. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the first one I got. And all right, I don't know how this will turn out for you to see. Oh, it's kind of tiny, isn't it?
Tiny.
Okay, can you see? This is a map of the world. Can you see that on your screen, kind of? I know it might not be too bright. But anyway, I found out of my 99.8% of what I am is European. So all this in blue is the continent of Europe. So what I am is all European, and just like my parents told me, I'm 51.5% probably German. So just like they thought. But what I found out, I don't know if you can see this, is I found out I was 7.3% British, and I was also 4% Scandinavian from the country of Denmark. And then there was some other percentages they couldn't really nail down, but I'll just show you some of the maps and zoom in. I can't really tell how they're looking on your screen. Mrs. Hartman, can you even see them?
They're looking okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's hard to see the gray around the world, but we can see the Europe.
Okay, let me make this one bigger. This is my German one. So this is the country of Germany. And I remember my grandparents, they were both born, or all my grandparents were actually born in America, but their parents, actually I was gonna say their grandparents, some of their grandparents were not. And so they could still speak some German, my grandparents. But my parents don't really speak German, and I don't really speak German either. But we used to say some prayers in German. I remember when we'd have family get-togethers with my grandparents and things like that. And my grandma used to throw in some German words once in a while. But I found out the darker the blue is probably the part of Germany they came from. So more Western Germany here is where I was from, or maybe Berlin, which is the capital of Germany. So I never got to visit Germany, but just last summer I was in Belgium. So that's getting closer to where I was from.
Mrs. Keys, I was in your part of Germany.
You were? Well, that's amazing. Because you were in Belgium, weren't you, Mrs. Hartman?
I was in Belgium, and then we went over to Germany for a day.
Someday I would love to get to Germany. Okay, and then what I found out with the British, and British, for some reason, British books and movies have always been my favorite, and here I found out I was a little bit British. Maybe that had something to do with it, I don't know. But the darkest green was by London. So one of my ancestors, you might have heard of the capital of London. It's a very large city. I have never been there either. But that's where some of my ancestors may have come from. And then the final one was the Scandinavian. And Scandinavian countries, this one really surprised my parents because they didn't know that we had any relatives from Denmark. But in the past, the city of Copenhagen, that's another capital. I guess my relatives, some of them like to live in capital cities, was over here in Denmark. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today. And how many of you, I'm going to stop sharing now. I want to see a thumbs up. How many of you have seen a family tree? And it's not really a tree. It's on paper, isn't it? But it kind of looks like a tree, and it can kind of tell you where your parents or your ancestors came from. My husband's side of the family, they have theirs in a book. And so it goes on, and it shows all their different ancestors way, way back to the 1500s. And his family, actually, some of his family was French, and they actually came to Canada in the 1600s, I believe. So they've been in America for a very long time. So that's what I wanted to share. Mrs. Hartman and I have both been to Ellis Island. In fact, I dug my pictures out. I went there in 2002. That was a long time ago, 18 years ago. But Mrs. Hartman, have you been there more recently?
I was there last summer.
Okay, so she's going to share a little bit about what she's seen at Ellis Island.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I had a terrible computer catastrophe and I lost a lot of my pictures for Ellis Island. It crashed back in February. So you're going to have to take it from memory, and then I'm going to go to the Scholastic site and share kind of what we did and we walked through. The immigrants a lot of them came from Europe, somewhere in Europe, and they would get on a ship and they would travel across the ocean, and the first thing that they would see as they are coming into the harbor after 1886 was the Statue of Liberty. Why do you think that was the first thing they saw after 1886? I see Uriah, but you'll have to unmute yourself. Why do you think it was the first thing they saw?
Because it's in the middle of the water, and that's the first thing you would see when you.
Okay, but
they could
before
pass by it.
1886, they didn't see it.
Oh, they didn't.
Nope, only after 1886. Anybody else have any thoughts? Ella.
It was probably because it was still in construction before 1886, because it was given to us by the French.
It was, yes. And
don't they have a Statue of Liberty in France too?
They do. And when I was in France, I missed it by this much.
They have several.
You saw it, Mrs. Spies?
I saw several. And
Yeah.
they have different size ones too.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're very proud of the Statue of Liberty over there because we saw it in several cities, replicas of the statue.
And the poem on the Statue of Liberty was written by a woman named Emma Lazarus. And the end of the poem says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses." And those are people, they're thinking about the people who were oppressed or didn't have a good life in other countries and welcoming them here to the United States. And the United States became known as the melting pot of the world. And melting pot means you just put a whole bunch of things into a cooking pot. So that's saying all our different culture backgrounds all mixed together. And it's called a melting pot. So they would pack up everything they owned into a steamer trunk and get on this ship and come over. Mrs. Dudley, I'm going to defer to you and the steamer trunk here. So Mrs. Dudley's going to share about this. This is in her house. Mrs. Dudley, unmute yourself.
My sister and I each have one of these. And when I was growing up, when I was your age, I think I probably told you this in class before, but my grandmother and her sister and her foster brother lived in a little house next door that my father had built for them because they were all elderly. They were all in their 80s. And so when they passed away, I inherited my grandma or my great aunt's trunk, and my sister inherited our grandma's trunk. But they came over from Ireland, and they had to fit everything they owned into this trunk. So each person got one trunk, and that was everything they had, all their clothes, all their possessions, everything went in there. And then it's a metal and wood trunk, so it's made pretty heavy, but it carried everything that they brought over. And actually their family, their mom had passed away, and so they were just with their dad. And they also brought another boy who was 12 with them because he had lost both of his parents, and he came from the Netherlands. And then he grew up with my grandmother's family, and they just considered him a brother. But It's kind of neat to hear all their stories through the years. That's the outside of it. So it had leather straps and a lock. You can see the big lock on the front of it. And then the straps on the side were for carrying it.
Those were made out of leather, right, Mrs.
It's
Dudley?
all leather and wood and metal. Yep. And that was originally a dark green color, but it's been restored somewhat.
That's
So,
a really cool artifact that you have from your family history. Wow. Do some of you have some artifacts that come from your family histories around your house? Serenity, do you have something?
We have to
Well,
un-
you're muted now, dear, but we'll go on. Maybe we'll share maybe at the end.
Yeah,
Can you?
we can share those at the end if you have some artifacts. So I'm going to go back, and the boat would arrive at Ellis Island, and the first thing that they would do is have the boat, and then here is the building at Ellis Island. And for those of you that are still doing your field trip, or you have, hopefully you have seen what the building looks like. So they would be coming from their foreign country. They'd be getting on the ships. Look at how packed they were. They're excited to be in America, these children, and they would even have time for dancing aboard the ships. So that was the passage. They would arrive, seeing the Statue of Liberty after 1886. Very excited as soon as they saw the land and they knew they were in New York Harbor. And she's got a net over her face. That's why you see the dots. She's not sick. I move my pictures here a little bit. Then they would arrive in the baggage room. Just like Mrs. Dudley's steamer trunk, they would carry all their belongings, and they would arrive in the baggage room, and they would have to decide, am I going to leave my baggage here? Is it going to be safe? Or do I walk it with me? And they were pretty much told they had to leave their bags there and trust that they would have them when they went through all the different inspections. So you can see all the steamer trunks piled here. So now, so you have these buildings. We came in the front door and we went into the baggage room. Now we're going up a set of stairs through all of these lines. How many of you have ever been to like an amusement park and you had to walk through all the lines? Think about that. There were lots of people. They had to get to the registry room, and they would have to be checked for an eye disease to make sure they didn't have an eye disease. If they had an eye disease, they had to get back on a ship and head back to their country. They weren't allowed in.
If you listen to the read aloud today, that story, that was about a boy, and they talked about the trachoma that was the eye disease. But there were other reasons.
Yeah.
If you watch one of the other movies on it, very few people did get sent back, but sometimes people had to get detained in a hospital as well, and lots of reasons. Go on, Mrs. Hartman, I'm sorry.
Nope, that's okay. So now we get to our next room. This is called the Great Hall. This was the one that stood out to me the most at Ellis Island because it was so big and so tall and so wide open. You could hear your echo in there. Now, we didn't yell loud, but there were lots of people there. So it echoed a lot because of what they made it out of. So look at this big room, the multiple levels that there were. And they had a whole bunch of desks up here and all these people waiting in line where they had to register and have their all their information documented. And that's the information that they keep at Ellis Island now to show who has arrived. Look at all these lines going back and forth. Places to
There's a
sit along
picture
the
of me
way.
there.
What?
That's a picture of me in the Great Hall right there.
Okay. Here they are standing up to the registry. They're all next to each other. These guys are recording the information, and these are the immigrants. It looks like a lot of the immigrants tried to dress as nicely as they could to be accepted in. It made them look more important, that America would welcome them, that they would be going to find jobs. But there was a lot of biases towards different people just because they were a different background, which was really sad. And then here, these flags are still up in that Great Hall today. And then after they went to the registry room, they went for a medical exam, and they had a letter identifying them. If they had an X, it meant they were insane or they were kind of crazy. A P meant had lung problems. So not a lot of people were turned away because of this, but they had some sort of mark on them identifying if it was okay to go or not okay to go. And here they're inspecting their lungs and walking through. It was just kind of like a walk-through clinic. They just looked at them relatively quickly and headed on through. And here's all of the different symbols that they had depending on whether they were okay to come or if they had something and had to go to a hospital.
And one of the things is they didn't do that to be mean, but they wanted these people, if they came to America, they wanted them to have a good life. They wanted them to be able to make a living and have a job. And if they had a certain kind of illness and maybe couldn't do that, they might have to know somebody that could help them. So it was a lot about making sure that they would have a way of making a living and do well and have enough money to survive here too.
Okay, and then off to the legal inspection that they had to do. And a lot of the things that they asked is, where were you born? Are you married? What's your occupation or job? Have you ever been convicted of a crime in the country you're coming from? How much money do you have? And what's your destination? Where are you going? They had 29 questions to answer before they were allowed to go past this room. And then there was a place for detainees, the place where they waited if they were sick. There were babies that were born here. Sometimes they didn't go into New York until after the babies were born. And they had to wait here if they failed the health or the legal aspect. Eventually, most of these people came out of the detainee room. It was a place, kind of a holding place for a while.
Right, and another reason too is some of the illnesses could be contagious, so they might be held there until they weren't contagious anymore.
Oh, you know what? I should go to some of the photos here.
Wow, some good photos. Yeah,
Look at
that's
how
the
high up some of those
hospitals.
beds are.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know a lot about diseases then and how to contain them. So that was a type of protection and social distancing that they had in those days. And then here was a room, the hearing room. Okay, and then there was the stairs of separation, and that decided where they were. There were 3 aisles going down the stairs, and they were brought, immigrants who were being detained went down the center aisle. People who were traveling west or south walked down the right, and people who traveled east or north into New York City were going down the left side. And at the bottom, there was a post office and place you could buy tickets for railroads. It was a place to exchange money because the money that they had was foreign money and they didn't accept that then, so they had to exchange it for the US dollar. And the exchange rates were posted on the bulletin boards. So here's the stairs of separation. I do remember walking down these. I don't even remember which one I walked down. And then here was where they could buy all their train tickets or railroad tickets because they would have had to travel by railroad. And the 10th spot was called the Kissing Post. I know you're all going, oh. And that was, it was nicknamed that because that's where the family and friends from immigrants who came before were there and waiting and shouted their joy and relief to be seeing their family. Remember, they didn't have social media to be able to connect with one another. Letters took weeks and months, not minutes, not even days like in the United States now. And they were so happy to have their family or their friends in America. And then there was the Ellis Island Ferry that took them into New York City, which was right there. And that is where we are back to the beginning. So it was kind of neat when I was at Ellis Island to be able to walk through all of those stations and learn all of those things. And if you want to go deeper in, there's audio, there's video on that site that is connected to our virtual field trip today. But that is also one of your stops on your Explore pages is this Zoom link right here that you've participated in. So, Mrs. Spies, any thoughts?
Well, should we have a little sharing and question time? Miss Gallagher, is there anything you wanted to add first?
Sure. So thinking about my family history, on my mom's side of the family, they're English. So they all came from England. And they came fairly early on. And they came in the late 1700s. And they all started in medical fields right away. So a lot of my relatives on that side were either like doctors or nurses and a lot of things like that, surgeons. And then on my dad's side of the family, it's a little bit different. They're mostly Irish and German. And so they came a little bit later in the later 1800s. And I have a similar story to Mrs. Hartman where our last name changed from O. Gallagher. It used to be O. Gallagher, very, very Irish. And they dropped the O when they were on the boat and then they made it just Gallagher. So those are my two stories from each side.
Cool, that's very interesting. Anyone else have a question or want to share?
Okay, when it's your turn, make sure you unmute.
Sure.
Izzy?
I have to go.
Okay, we'll see ya. Thanks for joining us today. You can come
Bye,
back
Izzy.
tomorrow.
Bye, Izzy.
Okay,
I
Uriah.
don't know. Okay,
Oh,
who's Uriah?
I have a family cookbook that we got. This is my ancestors right here.
oh,
So cool.
Wow, that's neat.
where are they from?
Germany.
Okay.
Can you tell us one of the recipes in there?
Yeah.
One?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Mm,
I know there was some different ones. Here, you can just pick one.
let me go back.
Here, see, Grandpa mixed chili.
There's one called Grandpa's Nick's Chili. Right here.
Cool.
Oh, fun. Have you eaten that chili before then?
No, I haven't. And I saw another one over here that I saw. And there's also one called barbecue cocktail sausage.
Oh,
And have you eaten that one?
No, I haven't eaten. I have? Oh, yes, I have.
Maybe you could add your lumberjack recipes into there for the future that you had for future generations for your ancestry cookbook.
I could. I still have the thing somewhere.
Uh-huh.
I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you, Serenity.
Is there anyone else? Cam? did you have your hand up? Rowan, are you still there? Rowan?
Yes, I'm still here.
Can we see you for a minute? Because I wanted to ask
I'm
you.
gonna show you quick. Yeah. This is my grandma Rachel's dog. Her name
Okay,
is
Serenity, this is about immigration today, okay?
Bye.
Rowan, you talked about how you went to a different kind of museum when you were in New York City, and they, what was that museum you visited? Because I read what you were writing about today.
It was in Washington, D.C.
Oh, it was
It
in
was-
Washington, D.C. Okay.
It was kind of similar to what we learned about, but instead of Russian people, it was the Nazis and how they did that stuff to the Jewish people. And it was a perspective of a little Jewish boy when that was happening.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting. She wrote and connected that to the story of Grisha in our read aloud today. And he was a Jewish boy, and his family was forced out of the country of Russia. So that was very interesting. That would be a museum I'd like to see someday. Cam, did you see that one too then? Yeah. Anyone else want to share where their family's from? Does anyone else know? Cam?
Well, we don't really know too much about our great-great-grandpa.
Speak very loudly.
We don't really know too much about our great-great-grandma and great-great-grandpa, but we know that what our great-great-grandpa, he fought in one of the wars, I think, and he was very Swedish. So that's why
Okay. Serenity. Thank you, Cam.
I have to get going.
Okay,
Okay,
bye-bye.
that's okay.
Bye. I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah. If anybody else needs to get going, that's okay. You can
Sure.
head out.
Whenever you need
Bye.
to. Bye. Maddie, your hand is up.
my grandpa is part Polish, I think. And my grandma is from Norway. And they're both a little bit Spanish. Not very though.
Whoa.
Uriah, I see your hand up again. I don't think I see anybody else's.
I know my dad's and mom's sides. My dad is from Italy and Native American, Apache. My mom's from Polish, Irish, Germany, and Czech. And I wanted to show you another cook thing that my mom found. It's called Old Recipe. It's Grandma Kleiken's Dinner Cookies. Ginger cookies.
Are those good?
Yes, you have. Grandma
Yeah.
made 'em.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yes, I've tried them before. They're good.
You've
Thank
eaten
you
more
for
out of that
sharing.
than you realized.
Yeah, I forgot. I forget. I've never looked in this book before.
Yeah, that's fun to look at family history stuff.
It is.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if anyone else I don't see any other hands up. So any questions at all before we go?
Michael.
Michael.
Wait, I have a question. Shouldn't the meeting have ended like 36 minutes ago?
No, it started at 11.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
But I'm reading this. The link below to join at 10:55. Your tour leaves at 11.
Oh,
Yes,
did you read the word leaves and think that that means that that would be done? Was that confusing word?
Oh,
Okay,
oh,
sure.
I see what it is.
That confused me too.
It means we were starting to talk about the tour and the stuff.
Like
So we
our
were-
tour was off to leave to take our tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see the confusion.
Yeah.
That was good attention to detail, though, Michael. Good
Yes,
job.
it was. Okay. Well, thank you for coming along today. And Mrs. Hartman and Mrs. Dudley and Miss Gallagher, we're going to do this tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Okay, and tomorrow is Wisconsin Day.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, and then say that again.
We're going to travel our state tomorrow.
Ah,
Hartman
So-
was going to ask where we were going.
Yep. So, all right. So if the teachers can stay on, the kids have a great day. I hope you learned a lot. If you haven't finished your homework, go ahead and finish it.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thanks for touring with the AMS Touring Company.
Betty's Basement Bar Market.
Yeah. You don't want to go
Hopefully
with that
we're not
tour
that
group.
bad.
Terry and Brenna.
Yeah. Hi, Terry. Nice to
Hi,
see
Terry.
you.
We can't see you though. I wish we could. But bye-bye.
There's no audio and there's no video on her, so I'm not sure she can see or hear us.
Oh no.
Do you
As
want- do you have-
administrator, can you?
What?
As
You can, I think-
administrator, can you end it
I think you can.
from
Yeah.
her?
I have never done that. I'm going to
I'm
put her
pretty
in
sure
the
you
waiting
can.
room. I'm going to put her in the waiting room just
Yeah.
because if I remove her, I don't know if she can come back tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So I
Okay,
did that
same.
accidentally with Bradley and I haven't seen him since.
Oh no.
I know he's been on, but all right. That was not bad.
No. No, I wish we would have had a few more.
Yeah, I know.